When Dr. Evelyn Vogel first appeared in Dexter's final season, she seemed like the missing piece of the puzzle, the mysterious creator of the code, the woman who shaped Dexter into the serial killer we know. She called herself his spiritual mother, a guiding hand. But was she really a savior, or the most dangerous manipulator of them all? Today we're diving deep into Vogel's role, how she reshaped Dexter's world, manipulated everyone around her, and maybe left behind more destruction than anyone else in the series. Dr. Evelyn Vogel was introduced to viewers as the so-called psychopath whisperer, a brilliant neuropsychiatrist who claimed to understand the darkest corners of the human mind. But as Dexter Morgan and the audience quickly discovered, her role was far more complex than that of a mentor. Behind her clinical expertise lay manipulation, secrecy, and perhaps even a touch of the very psychopathy she claimed to study. In this video, we'll break down Dr. Vogel's psychology, the influence she had on Dexter and Deborah, and why her presence reshaped the narrative in ways no one expected. Dr. Evelyn Vogel isn't just a neuroscientist who studies psychopaths. She created them, at least in the sense that her work helped define what modern psychiatry understands about their behavior. This sets her apart from anyone Dexter has ever encountered. She isn't scared of him. Instead, she sees him as the ultimate success story of her theories, a killer who follows a code rather than giving in to chaos. But beneath this clinical brilliance lies a much darker side. Vogel's relationship with Dexter blurs the lines between science, manipulation, and motherhood. She doesn't just analyze him, she frames his very existence as her experiment. By calling him her perfect creation, she strips away his autonomy, reducing his humanity to a proof of concept. For viewers, it raises the unsettling question: is Vogel helping Dexter or grooming him all over again? Her manipulative streak isn't limited to Dexter. Vogel often hides truths, controls narratives, and presents herself as indispensable. She carefully chooses when to reveal personal details, keeping people close enough to trust her, but never giving up full control. It's a classic hallmark of someone with narcissistic tendencies, always needing to remain the authority, even in the most dangerous situations. Vogel's ethics and manipulation. One of the most chilling aspects of Dr. Vogel's character is the way she treats people as test subjects rather than human beings. Time and again, her decisions show a willingness to sacrifice others if it means protecting her theories or maintaining control. A clear example is her involvement with the brain surgeon case. Vogel doesn't just help track down the killer, she withholds information, manipulates Dexter, and seems almost fascinated by the unfolding carnage. Instead of recoiling in horror, she analyzes it like a case study, keeping her cards close until the very end. Her past is just as disturbing. Her professional work was groundbreaking, but it also left scars. When a former patient confronted her, it became clear that her surgical interventions had not healed him, but instead destroyed his life. For Vogel, this wasn't tragedy. It was collateral damage in the pursuit of knowledge. Even when confronted by killers who knew she had betrayed them, Vogel's instinct wasn't remorse, but control. She deflected, rationalized, and tried to twist the narrative in her favor. These moments revealed the core of her character, a woman so consumed by her role as the mother of psychopaths that she no longer sees morality in human terms. Did Dr. Vogel actually groom Dexter's urges? When Evelyn Vogel enters Dexter's life, she doesn't come in as a stranger. She comes in as someone who claims to know him better than he knows himself. For Dexter, who has always carried the burden of his secret life alone, Vogel represents something dangerously tempting: acceptance. She doesn't recoil from his darkness. Instead, she embraces it, reminding him that she designed the very code that shaped his actions. This creates a dynamic unlike any other relationship Dexter has ever experienced. With Harry, there was always guilt, disappointment, and the weight of secrecy. With Deborah, there was love, but also disillusionment once she discovered who he really was. Vogel offers no judgment. She doesn't just tolerate Dexter's killings, she validates them, framing his actions as the fulfillment of a greater design. But that acceptance comes with a price. Vogel constantly positions herself as the architect of Dexter's life, undermining his sense of autonomy. She treats him as both a son and a specimen, blurring the line between maternal care and clinical detachment. To Dexter, this is destabilizing. Is she a guide, a manipulator, or a woman clinging to relevance by asserting control over the monster she helped create? The tension between them reveals the central question of their relationship. Is Dexter truly his own person, or is he still just following a blueprint designed by someone else? Vogel forces him to confront that question in ways no one else ever has. One of the most unnerving aspects of Dr. Evelyn Vogel wasn't just what she said, but how she looked at Dexter. There are key scenes where the mask of kindly mentor slips and her gaze becomes something sharper, predatory, almost like she's savoring Dexter the way one might savor a specimen in a jar. Take the scenes where she recalls James Dokes. Vogel doesn't talk about Dokes like he was a man, a colleague, or even a victim of circumstance. Instead, she almost toys with Dexter about him, dangling the details of how Dokes was suspicious, how he got too close. The way she lingers on those memories feels less like clinical detachment and more like someone needling a patient to watch how they squirm. The way she also seems to keep telling him just what he wants to hear, as if she's feeding the ego of his dark passenger, that he's perfect and all that. This seems to be clear when he realizes that he was just her first project and she was going to teach the code to Zach, a kid who showed psychopathic killer tendencies. In those moments, it's not hard to see Vogel as sadistic, someone who enjoys seeing Dexter off balance, cornered, reminded of the fatal miscalculation. Deb as Vogel's blind spot. At first glance, Vogel's attempts to help Deborah seem like maternal concern, stepping in to mend the fragile bond between sister and brother. But beneath the surface, her motives were far less about Deb's well-being and more about self-preservation. Deb was the weak link in Vogel's carefully constructed chain. She was volatile, guilt-ridden, and worst of all, she knew the truth. Vogel wasn't just a mentor to Dexter, she was his architect. If Deb completely collapsed, the dirty secret of Vogel's greatest achievement, the creation of a functional serial killer, could come to light. Instead of validating Deb's pain, Vogel redirects everything back to Dexter. She insists that Deb must understand and accept who her brother is, minimizing the cost this acceptance has on Deb's mental health. It's telling that Vogel never once seriously considered whether Dexter's darkness has ruined Deb's life. Instead, she treats Deb's suffering as collateral damage in her lifelong experiment. In this light, Vogel's mentorship looks less like wisdom and more like gaslighting. By pushing Deb to accept the unacceptable, she reveals how little empathy she truly possesses. To Vogel, the feelings of those around Dexter matter only insofar as they keep her creation functioning. That's why the therapy sessions ring so hollow. One of the most telling moments is when Deb confesses to Vogel that she killed LaGuerta. It's a raw, painful admission, a moment where Deb should have been met with empathy or tough honesty. Instead, Vogel doesn't dwell on the morality of the act or Deb's crushing trauma. She sidesteps it. To Vogel, Deb's confession isn't a cry for help, it's just intel. It's confirmation of how far Deb has fallen, and therefore how careful Vogel needs to be in managing her. By extending Deb a lifeline, Vogel wasn't saving her, she was containing her. Every word of encouragement was less about Deb's healing and more about keeping Dexter functional. Vogel needed him sharp, focused, and loyal to her mission to eliminate the brain surgeon. A broken Deb threatened that focus. What makes it chilling is how Vogel weaponized compassion. She positioned herself as Deb's confidant, but only enough to stabilize her, not to heal her, not to free her, just enough to ensure Deb wouldn't detonate and destroy everything Vogel had built. In a way, Vogel's death at the hands of her own son mirrors what she overlooked, family bonds she couldn't control. She thought she owned Dexter's loyalty. She thought Deb was weak, but in dismissing Deb's importance, Vogel signed her own death warrant. Dexter chose Deborah, flawed, human, and painfully real, over Vogel's sterile idea of perfection. In the end, Vogel's greatest failure wasn't her death, it was her inability to see that Deb was never collateral. She was the one thing even the perfect psychopath couldn't live without. Evelyn and Harry's relationship. The connection between Evelyn Vogel and Harry Morgan is perhaps the most disturbing thread in this entire web. We learn that Vogel was the one who proposed the idea of channeling Dexter's urges rather than suppressing them. The code of Harry, the moral compass that defined Dexter's life, may not have been Harry's invention after all, but Vogel's clinical design. That reframes Harry in a darker light. Was he a desperate father trying to save his son, or was he manipulated into becoming an accomplice in Vogel's experiment? Harry clearly believed he was protecting Dexter, but Vogel was the one handing him the tools, the logic, the justification. There's also the weight of Harry's eventual suicide. If Harry felt crushed by the guilt of what he created, doesn't that suggest Vogel's influence came at a terrible cost? While Vogel speaks of Dexter with pride, calling him her perfect creation, Harry couldn't live with the burden of it. That contrast paints Vogel less like a nurturing mentor and more like a cold architect, willing to gamble with real lives to prove her theories. Evelyn's relationship with her own son. The reveal that Evelyn Vogel's own son, Daniel Vogel, also known as Oliver Saxon, was a psychopath completely recontextualizes everything about her. From the very beginning, her obsession with studying and guiding psychopaths wasn't just academic, it was deeply personal. Her son was a killer, and she couldn't save him. In many ways, her work with Dexter was a twisted attempt to rewrite that failure. If she couldn't fix her own child, perhaps she could mold someone else's into a controllable force. But her relationship with Daniel exposes her own blind spots. She treats him less like a dangerous predator and more like a project she still believes she can fix. Even when the evidence against him is overwhelming, she slips into denial, hoping against hope that maternal instinct will succeed where clinical logic failed. That willingness to give him chance after chance contrasts sharply with her detached pride in Dexter and makes her seem hypocritical, even reckless. Her death at the hands of her own son feels like the inevitable conclusion of her story. After all, she spent her life trying to outthink psychopaths, trying to prove she could manage them, guide them, even create a better version of them. Yet, in the end, it was her own son who turned on her, exposing the fatal flaw in her philosophy. You can't contain or control true darkness, not forever. Vogel saw herself as the mother of monsters, but in the end, the monster closest to her was the one who destroyed her. Evelyn Vogel's legacy within Dexter is complicated, unsettling, and perhaps deliberately unfinished. On the surface, she's introduced as the so-called mother of psychopaths, the hidden architect behind Harry's code and, by extension, Dexter's entire life. But the deeper we look, the more fractured her influence becomes. She claimed to understand psychopaths, to nurture them, to protect society by shaping their impulses into something useful. Yet in practice, her work leaves behind a trail of destruction. Her biological son becomes a monster she cannot control. Her attempt to mold a troubled boy into the next Dexter nearly ends in tragedy. And Dexter himself, her greatest success, spends much of his life struggling to reconcile the gap between who he is and who she insists he was meant to be. Vogel's true legacy may not be the code at all, but the myth of control, the belief that human darkness can be categorized, managed, even weaponized with the right set of rules. That belief comforts Dexter for a time, just as it validates Vogel's career, but in the end it proves fragile. Neither Harry, nor Vogel, nor even Dexter himself can keep that darkness contained forever. In this way, Vogel becomes both mentor and cautionary tale. She provides Dexter with answers he craves, but also reveals the danger of building an identity on someone else's design. Her death and the chaos surrounding it underscore a sobering truth. The dark passenger cannot be domesticated, only endured. Finally, the reveal that Evelyn Vogel's own son, Daniel Vogel, also known as Oliver Saxon, was a psychopath completely recontextualizes everything about her. From the very beginning, her obsession with studying and guiding psychopaths wasn't just academic, it was deeply personal. Her son was a killer, and she couldn't save him. In many ways, her work with Dexter was a twisted attempt to rewrite that failure. If she couldn't fix her own child, perhaps she could mold someone else's into a controllable force. But her relationship with Daniel exposes her own blind spots. She treats him less like a dangerous predator and more like a project she still believes she can fix. Even when the evidence against him is overwhelming, she slips into denial, hoping against hope that maternal instinct will succeed where clinical logic failed. That willingness to give him chance after chance contrasts sharply with her detached pride in Dexter and makes her seem hypocritical, even reckless. Her death at the hands of her own son feels like the inevitable conclusion of her story. After all, she spent her life trying to outthink psychopaths, trying to prove she could manage them, guide them, even create a better version of them. Yet, in the end, it was her own son who turned on her. Evelyn Vogel's death isn't just another shocking kill in Dexter. It's thematically loaded, almost poetic. She dies at the hands of her own son, the very psychopath she failed to control. It mirrors the way she once tried to parent Dexter, except Dexter, under Harry's code, became her greatest success. Daniel, on the other hand, represents her greatest failure. In that sense, Vogel's story is framed like a closed loop. She spent her life birthing ideas, birthing codes, and shaping killers into what she thought they should be. Yet what she created ultimately circled back to consume her. The code of Harry, which she inspired, gave Dexter purpose and order, but her biological son, untouched by the code, embodied raw, unchecked chaos. It's almost as though Vogel's death is the narrative's way of punishing her hubris. She believed she could guide psychopaths, that she could be the architect of their morality. But the irony is brutal. The son she nurtured through theory, Dexter, ends up surviving, while her actual son slaughters her. It's a reminder that monsters can't be domesticated forever, no matter how clinical or maternal the approach. In the end, Vogel dies not just as a victim of her son,